A young girl vanished while feeding chickens at dawn, leaving her family heartbroken. But 23 years later, her sister buys the farm, and when she starts digging, what she uncovers makes her blood run cold. Dawn painted the Oak Ridge sky in soft golden hues as Frank Anderson swung his legs over the edge of the bed, careful not to wake Martha. The floorboards creaked beneath his feet, a familiar symphony in their aging farmhouse. Through the window, Montana's rolling landscape stretched toward distant mountains, the same view that had greeted generations of Andersons each morning. The rooster's crow pierced the early morning silence, right on schedule. Frank pulled on his worn work shirt and made his way downstairs, the smell of coffee already wafting from the kitchen. Martha stood at the stove, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, spatula in hand, as she prepared breakfast for their small family. "Morning," Frank said, pressing a kiss to his wife's temple. "Girls up yet?" "Samantha's in the shower. Lily should be down any minute," Martha replied, flipping a golden pancake. "Can you check the propane level today? Feels like the stove isn't heating right." The sound of light footsteps preceded 8-year-old Lily's appearance in the doorway, her blonde hair still mussed from sleep, her favorite gray dress already on. Martha smiled at her youngest daughter, wiping her hands on her apron. "There's my early bird. Ready for your morning chores?" Martha asked, reaching for the small metal bucket she kept filled with chicken feed beside the pantry. Lily nodded eagerly, her blue eyes bright with responsibility. "The chickens are probably starving by now," she said with childish seriousness. Martha handed over the bucket of corn, adjusting the light jacket around Lily's shoulders. "It's a bit chilly this morning. Don't forget to count Mrs. Peckington's eggs. She's been hiding them again." Lily took the bucket with practiced hands, her small frame already accustomed to the weight. "Can I help make pancake shapes when I come back?" "Don't dawdle." "And yes," Martha smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead, "the pancakes will be waiting. Don't take too long, sweetie. They'll get cold." With a nod and a skip, Lily disappeared through the back door, the screen door slapping gently behind her. Through the kitchen window, Martha watched her daughter's small figure move across the yard toward the chicken coop, her gray dress fluttering around her knees in the morning breeze, corn occasionally spilling from the slightly too large bucket. 12-year-old Samantha entered the kitchen, her hair still damp from the shower. "Is there hot water left for Dad?" she asked, reaching for a glass of orange juice. "Should be," Martha replied, glancing at the clock as she turned another pancake. 7:45. Lily had been gone 15 minutes, longer than her usual chicken feeding routine took. At 8 o'clock, with a stack of pancakes growing cold on the table, Martha frowned and moved to the window. "Lily," she called out, leaning through the open pane. No answer came from the direction of the chicken coop. "Sam, could you check on your sister? Tell her breakfast is ready," Martha said, trying to keep the edge from her voice. Probably just chasing a chicken that got loose, she thought. Samantha nodded and headed outside, her footsteps quickening as she approached the chicken coop. The usual morning clucking and pecking seemed subdued. Rounding the corner, she stopped abruptly. The metal feed bucket lay on its side, corn scattered across the dirt. A few chickens pecked half-heartedly at the spilled grain, but of Lily there was no sign. "Lily!" Samantha called, her voice rising. "Lily, this isn't funny." She checked inside the coop, behind the water barrels, in the small storage shed. Nothing. "Mom!" Samantha's scream cut through the morning quiet. "I can't find Lily." Martha's heart lurched at the sound. She ran barefoot across the yard, her face paling as she saw the overturned bucket. "Lily!" she shouted, spinning in circles, scanning the property. "Lily Anderson, answer me right now!" Frank had been in the north field, tinkering with the troublesome tractor when he heard the commotion. He abandoned his tools mid-repair, sprinting toward the panicked voices. Martha's face told him everything before she spoke. "She's gone, Frank," Martha gasped, her voice breaking. "She went to feed the chickens, and now she's gone." The next hour passed in a blur of desperate searching. Frank checked the barn, the grain silo, the old cellar doors. Martha ran to the small creek that cut through their property, terrified of what she might find there. Samantha checked all of Lily's hiding places: the hollow oak, the space behind the woodpile, the old playhouse Frank had built years ago. At 9:23, Frank's shaking hands dialed the number he never thought he'd need. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's calm voice contrasted sharply with the chaos enveloping the Anderson farm. My daughter, Frank managed, his voice strangled. My daughter disappeared. Lily, she's 8 years old. She went out to feed the chickens this morning and she's just gone. Sheriff Roberts arrived 15 minutes later, his cruiser kicking up dust along the gravel drive. His weathered face remained professionally composed as he spoke to the frantic parents, but his eyes betrayed his concern. Kids this age sometimes wander off, he assured them, organizing his deputies into a search pattern. Let's check every inch of the property before we jump to conclusions. By noon, neighbors had arrived in pickup trucks and on ATVs, forming search parties that combed the surrounding fields and wooded areas. Martha sat on the porch steps, clutching Lily's school photo, her eyes never leaving the driveway, as if expecting her daughter to appear at any moment. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Sheriff Roberts' expression grew more serious. A K-9 unit arrived, and the German shepherd named Duke picked up Lily's scent from the overturned bucket. The dog followed the trail across the yard, through a small stand of trees, and directly to the dirt road that ran 800 yards from the Anderson house. There, Duke circled in confusion, whining softly. The handler looked grimly at Sheriff Roberts. The scent ends here, abruptly, like she got into a vehicle. As darkness fell, flashlights bobbed across the Anderson property and the surrounding countryside. Martha hadn't moved from her vigil by the kitchen phone, a cold cup of coffee untouched before her, her eyes fixed on the back door. Frank paced relentlessly, while Samantha curled on the couch, clutching Lily's stuffed unicorn, her young face etched with a guilt no 12-year-old should carry. The next morning, Special Agent Thompson from the FBI arrived, his crisp suit incongruous against the rural backdrop. He converted the barn into a command center, tacking up topographical maps and aerial photographs on the walls. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, Thompson said carefully, spreading out several documents on the kitchen table. I need to show you something concerning. He placed a grainy photograph before them. This blue truck was captured by the gas station security camera on Main Street. It passed heading toward your farm at 7:15 yesterday morning and was seen again, speeding away, at 8:30, approximately 20 minutes after Lily disappeared. Frank stared at the photograph of the blue truck, his hands trembling slightly as he traced the blurry outline with his fingertip. The timestamp in the corner confirmed what Agent Thompson had just explained. This vehicle had been near their farm precisely when Lily vanished. Do you recognize this truck? Thompson asked, his pen poised over his notepad. Have you seen it in the area before yesterday? Frank and Martha exchanged glances, both shaking their heads. There are dozens of blue trucks around here, Frank said. Farmers, ranchers, it's Montana. As dawn broke on the second day, the Anderson farm had transformed into an investigative hub. In the makeshift lab set up at Oak Ridge's small police station, forensic specialists hunched over the photograph of the blue truck, using specialized software to enhance the image. One technician adjusted contrast settings, trying to pull the license plate numbers from the grainy footage. I think that's a 3, maybe a 7 after it, she muttered to her colleague. Back at the farmhouse, Martha sat at the kitchen table, a shoebox of family photos open before her. Her hands trembled as she selected images of Lily. Lily on her first day of school, Lily at last summer's county fair, Lily holding a newborn chick. A neighbor, Ellen Mackenzie, placed a mug of tea beside her. You need to eat something, Martha, Ellen urged gently. Keep your strength up. Martha barely acknowledged the words, her focus entirely on selecting the perfect photo that would make strangers care about finding her daughter. She settled on a recent school picture, Lily's blonde braids falling over her shoulders, her smile revealing a missing front tooth, her blue eyes bright with childhood mischief. At the sheriff's office, Frank sat uncomfortably in a small interrogation room, stunned by the direction the questioning had taken. It's standard procedure, Mr. Anderson, Deputy Simmons explained, noting Frank's growing agitation. We need to rule out certain possibilities. Have you and your wife been experiencing marital problems? Any financial difficulties that might have created tension in the home? Frank's face flushed with anger. You think we had something to do with this? Our daughter is missing, and you're wasting time investigating us? Across town, the only print shop in Oak Ridge worked at maximum capacity. The ancient printer churned out hundreds of flyers bearing Lily's smiling face, her description, and the Andersons' phone number. Volunteers formed an assembly line, collating and stapling packets for distribution across 3 counties. Samantha pedaled her bicycle slowly down Main Street, methodically taping flyers to telephone poles, storefront windows, and community bulletin boards. She avoided the pitying glances from townsfolk who had known her since birth, focusing instead on making sure her sister's face was visible from every angle of Oak Ridge's small downtown. In the Anderson barn, Agent Thompson stood before a large corkboard, connecting photographs, witness statements, and timelines with red string. Based on the evidence so far, he explained to the assembled agents, we're working with a possible abduction scenario. The K-9 unit's trail ending at the road, the timing of the blue truck's movements, and the lack of any signs of a child wandering in the surrounding areas all point in this direction. Late that afternoon, a nervous woman in her 40s entered the sheriff's office, twisting her purse strap between her fingers. I wasn't sure if I should come forward, she began hesitantly. But I saw that truck on the news. Sheriff Roberts leaned forward. What did you see, Mrs. Everett? I was at the Millerton department store yesterday morning, about 30 miles north of here. There was a man buying girls' clothing, a nightgown, socks, underwear. I noticed because he seemed unsure about sizes. He was driving what looked like a blue Ford pickup. I remembered because he parked beside me, taking up 2 spaces. This new information energized the investigation. In the command center, agents unfurled regional maps, marking possible escape routes from Oak Ridge. Red circles indicated roadblocks and checkpoints established on major highways leading out of the county. That evening, while searching for spare blankets for the FBI agents working overnight, Martha made a disturbing discovery in Frank's desk drawer. A small bundle of threatening letters dating back 6 months, referencing gambling debts he had never mentioned to her. How could you keep this from me? Martha confronted him in their bedroom, her voice rising with each word. What if this has something to do with Lily? Frank's face crumpled. They were old debts from before we were married. I paid them off years ago. It couldn't possibly be related. From the hallway, Samantha listened, her heart pounding as her parents' angry voices carried through the partially closed door. A new, terrifying possibility entered her young mind, that her father's secrets might be responsible for Lily's disappearance. Shortly after midnight, Samantha's scream tore through the quiet house. Martha rushed to the girl's bedroom to find her older daughter sitting upright, trembling violently. I saw her, Mom, Samantha sobbed. I saw Lily in my dream. She was wearing her gray dress, but it was all wet and dirty. She kept saying she wanted to come home. The next morning, a hastily organized press conference took place on the courthouse steps. Sheriff Roberts, Agent Thompson, and Frank Anderson stood shoulder to shoulder before the assembled cameras and microphones, Lily's school photo displayed prominently on an easel beside them. We're asking anyone with information about 8-year-old Lily Anderson to come forward, Agent Thompson stated firmly. No detail is too small. As national media picked up the story, the Andersons' home phone began ringing constantly. Martha sat beside it, frantically writing down every tip, every possible sighting, while Frank evaluated each call's credibility with increasing desperation. A behavioral specialist from the FBI examined the bedroom the girls shared, carefully noting Lily's favorite stuffed animals, the books on her nightstand, the constellation of glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling above her bed. By sunset on the second day, a search team with flashlights and waders methodically combed the Jefferson River 3 miles from the Anderson farm, where one of the search dogs had shown particular interest earlier that afternoon. As midnight approached, exhaustion finally overcame the Anderson family. Martha reluctantly took the sleeping pill the family doctor had prescribed, while Frank collapsed fully clothed across their bed. Samantha curled up in her parents' room, unable to face the emptiness of the bed across from hers. The house had just settled into uneasy silence when the kitchen phone rang once. Martha bolted awake, rushing downstairs to answer it, her heart pounding painfully against her ribs. "Hello," she whispered urgently. A small, frightened voice came through the receiver. "Mommy?" Before Martha could respond, the line went dead, leaving only the hollow buzz of the dial tone and Martha's anguished scream for Frank, certain she had just heard her missing daughter's voice. "Mommy?" The child's voice echoed in Martha's mind as she clutched the phone receiver to her chest, her scream bringing Frank stumbling down the stairs two at a time. "It was her, Frank. I heard Lily's voice." Martha's entire body shook as Frank grabbed her shoulders, steadying her. "Are you certain?" His eyes, red-rimmed from exhaustion, suddenly blazed with desperate hope. Within minutes, telephone company technicians in navy blue uniforms crowded into the Anderson kitchen, attaching monitoring equipment to the phone line. A burly technician with a salt and pepper beard explained the trace system to Martha, demonstrating how it would instantly track any incoming calls. "If she calls again, keep her on the line as long as possible," he instructed gently. "Every second helps narrow down the location." Agent Thompson burst through the door 30 minutes later, his tie askew, having clearly dressed in haste. "We have a location," he announced, already turning back toward the door. "Big Sky truck stop on Interstate 90. I need a team there immediately." The security footage from the truck stop was grainy and shot from a high angle. In the FBI's makeshift investigation room, analysts hunched over monitors, frame by frame examining the video. They froze on an image captured at 11:47 the previous night. A man in a baseball cap and dark jacket holding the hand of a small child who could have been Lily. "Can you enhance this?" Thompson asked, leaning closer to the screen. "I need to see that child's face." In the kitchen, Martha repeatedly played the recording of the brief phone call. That single word, "Mommy," played dozens of times as she closed her eyes, trying to be absolutely certain it was Lily's voice. "It's her," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know my daughter's voice." In a small private office at the sheriff's station, Agent Thompson studied files on Raymond Keller. The surveillance photos showed a heavy-set, middle-aged man with cold eyes and an imposing presence. His record included suspected connections to loan sharking, money laundering, and intimidation, though he'd managed to avoid serious convictions. Later that afternoon, Thompson confronted Frank in the barn, away from Martha's hearing. "Mr. Anderson, I need complete honesty now," he said firmly, placing a folder containing Frank's financial records on a hay bale. "These bank withdrawals from 5 years ago, large amounts withdrawn weekly, and now these threatening letters. What exactly was your relationship with Raymond Keller?" Frank collapsed onto a stack of hay, cradling his head in his hands. When Samantha found him there an hour later, he was still in the same position, clutching one of Lily's pink rain boots, his face wet with tears. "Dad?" she whispered, approaching cautiously. "Is it my fault she's gone? I should have gone with her that morning." Frank pulled his older daughter into a fierce hug. "No, sweetheart, this is not your fault. It's—" He couldn't finish the sentence, the weight of guilt crushing his chest. At the Sacred Heart Church, Martha knelt alone before the altar, surrounded by votive candles she had lit one by one, each representing a prayer for Lily's safe return. The afternoon light filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows across her tear-stained face as she silently begged for a miracle. Meanwhile, a team of investigators methodically worked through the Big Sky truck stop, dusting the public phone booth for fingerprints and interviewing night shift employees who might have seen something. A young waitress recalled a man and child, but couldn't provide details beyond, "The kids seemed tired, and they didn't stay long." Back at the Anderson farm, Samantha carefully straightened Lily's side of their shared bedroom, making the bed with hospital corners, arranging stuffed animals in the exact formation her sister preferred. She picked up Lily's unicorn plush, stroking its pink mane. "I'm going to find you," she whispered to the toy, as if her sister could somehow hear. "I promise." That evening, the Anderson kitchen became the site of a tense meeting. Agent Thompson laid out what they knew about Raymond Keller. "He's known in certain circles as the Collector," Thompson explained grimly. "When people can't pay their debts with money, he finds alternative methods of collection." Martha's hand flew to her mouth. "You think he took Lily because of Frank's gambling debts?" At Oak Ridge Rural School, Lily's teacher, Mrs. Coleman, carefully gathered her students' workbooks and art projects, placing them in a cardboard box. She paused at Lily's last math assignment, noting the careful handwriting and precisely drawn numbers. On the classroom wall, colorful cards from other students expressed simple wishes. "Come back soon," and "We miss you, Lily." As the investigation entered its 7th day, newspaper headlines across the country featured Lily's story. Her school photo appeared on nightly newscasts, while a calendar on the Anderson kitchen wall silently marked the passing days with X's in red marker. Martha noticed the subtle shift in community response while shopping for essentials at the local grocery store. Mrs. Wilson, who had known Martha since high school, awkwardly changed aisles when she saw her approaching. Others offered sympathetic smiles but quickly averted their eyes, as if tragedy might be contagious. Each night, Samantha diligently recorded every detail of the investigation in a spiral notebook, creating timelines and lists of potential witnesses. The 12-year-old's handwriting grew increasingly small and precise as she filled page after page, determined that no piece of information would be lost. Late that night, as quiet finally settled over the Anderson home, a manila envelope was silently slipped beneath the front door. When Frank discovered it early the next morning and tore it open with trembling hands, he found a blonde braid tied with the same blue ribbon Lily had worn the day she disappeared, alongside a newspaper clipping with Raymond Keller's name circled in red. Frank stared at the blonde braid in his hands, the blue ribbon exactly matching the one Lily had worn that fateful morning. His legs gave way beneath him as he slumped against the doorframe, the newspaper clipping fluttering to the floor. The red circle around Raymond Keller's name seemed to pulse like a beating heart. "Martha!" he called, his voice cracking with emotion. "Martha, come here!" Within minutes, the blonde braid was sealed in an evidence bag, handled delicately by an FBI technician wearing purple latex gloves. The mobile forensic lab parked in the Andersons' driveway hummed with activity as specialists examined the hair sample under bright lights and powerful magnification. "We'll rush the DNA comparison," the lead technician assured Agent Thompson. "If this is Lily's hair, we'll know by morning." That afternoon, Frank sat in an improvised interrogation room at the sheriff's station, his face ashen as he finally revealed the full extent of his past. "I got in over my head at a poker game in Billings back in '95, he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I owed Keller $15,000. I sold the north parcel of land to pay him off. He shook my hand and said we were square." Agent Thompson spread photographs across the table, 3 school portraits of children who had vanished from Montana and Idaho between 1995 and 1997. Each of these families had connections to Keller, he explained grimly. Each had outstanding debts at the time their child disappeared. A strategic meeting convened at the FBI field office in Billings later that day. Agents surrounded a conference table covered with blueprints of Keller's office building and residence. "We'll need simultaneous raids on both locations," the tactical leader instructed. "Judge Franklin has signed the warrants. We move at dawn." The next morning, agents in tactical gear stormed Raymond Keller's opulent office suite. The heavy-set 60-year-old sat calmly behind his mahogany desk, an unlit cigar perched in the corner of his mouth. He barely raised an eyebrow as agents surrounded him with weapons drawn. During the subsequent interrogation, Keller's face remained impassive, betraying no emotion as Agent Thompson laid out the evidence connecting him to Lily's disappearance. "On October 17th, I was at the Valley Springs Charity Golf Tournament in Great Falls," Keller stated flatly. "100 witnesses can verify my whereabouts. I was there all day, raising money for children with cancer, ironically enough." His smirk made Thompson's blood boil. While Keller's personal alibi checked out, Investigators dug deeper into his business operations. In a back office of Keller's security consulting company, agents discovered employment records for dozens of men who served as debt collectors. Joel Mackenzie's name appeared on payroll documents dating back 3 years. "Mackenzie worked at your farm, correct?" Agent Thompson asked Frank later that day, showing him the employment records. "When did he leave?" Frank's brow furrowed. "About 6 months after Lily disappeared, said his mother was sick in Idaho and he needed to care for her." That evening, Martha attended her first support group meeting for parents of missing children in a community room in Bozeman. Sitting in a circle with 5 other parents, she listened as a woman with prematurely gray hair described finding her son after 8 years of searching. "He barely remembered me," the woman explained, twisting a tissue in her hands. "But we're rebuilding our relationship day by day." The hope in the woman's story provided Martha a sliver of comfort, something to cling to as she drove the 40 miles back to Oak Ridge in the gathering darkness. At the kitchen table, Frank spread out piles of bills, medical expenses for Martha's anxiety medication, mortgage payments, utility notices with red "Final Warning" stamps. With his leave of absence from the sawmill stretching into its 3rd week, their financial situation was becoming dire. Before dawn the next morning, Samantha slipped out to the chicken coop, carefully collecting eggs in the gray light. She placed them in small cardboard cartons she had decorated with colorful drawings, preparing to sell them in town to contribute whatever she could to the family's dwindling resources. $5 a dozen isn't much, she told her father over breakfast, but maybe it'll help with groceries at least. Sheriff Roberts and an FBI agent spent the afternoon interviewing former farm employees about Joel Mackenzie. A retired ranch hand named Pete Davis recalled something troubling. Mackenzie seemed mighty interested in the little one, always volunteering to pick her up from school or church events. Struck me as odd at the time. That evening, while searching through Lily's belongings for a photograph requested by the FBI, Martha discovered a small diary hidden beneath her daughter's mattress. Her hands trembled as she opened it, gasping at an entry from the week before the disappearance. "Mr. Mack showed me the kittens in the barn today. He said it's our secret and I can't tell anyone, not even Sam." In the investigation room, a large map of the United States now displayed dozens of pins marking reported sightings of Lily. The concentration of credible reports formed a loose pattern across the Northwest, with several pins clustered near the Canadian border. Samantha set up a small stand in the town square on Saturday, selling eggs and vegetables from their garden. As she made change for Mrs. Gladwell, she overheard 2 men talking near the hardware store. "Shame about the Anderson girl," one said, "but it's been nearly 2 weeks. You know what they say about the first 48 hours. "Doubt they'll find her now," the other replied. "Poor folks should start trying to move on." Samantha's hands clenched into fists, but she said nothing, channeling her anger into even greater determination. That night, Agent Thompson called with troubling news. Joel Mackenzie had vanished. His last known address in Missoula had been abandoned 3 months earlier, with no forwarding address or employment records. Frank's cell phone rang just after midnight. Fumbling in the darkness, he answered with a sleep-roughened, "Hello?" "Anderson," came a deep, controlled voice. "I don't have your daughter, but I know who does, and I can help you find her, for a price. Meet me alone tomorrow at noon at the old abandoned mill, and don't involve the FBI if you want to see Lily again." Frank recognized Raymond Keller's voice instantly and lay awake the rest of the night, torn between hope and terror. Frank gripped his cell phone tightly, Keller's voice still echoing in his ears. Dawn was breaking over the mountains as he made his decision. Without waking Martha, he scribbled a vague note about checking a lead and left it on the kitchen counter. His gaze lingered on Lily's photograph hanging on the wall, her missing tooth and bright smile twisting the knife of guilt deeper into his heart. The drive to the abandoned mill took 20 minutes along winding dirt roads. Frank's pickup bounced over potholes and ruts, dust billowing behind him as he pushed deeper into the dense woods surrounding Oak Ridge. Tall pines gave way to a clearing where the dilapidated wooden structure stood, its broken mill wheels motionless against the gray morning sky. Stepping inside the mill, Frank's eyes took a moment to adjust to the dimness. Dust particles danced in the few rays of sunlight that penetrated through gaps in the rotting timber walls. Raymond Keller emerged from the shadows, his expensive suit incongruous against the decaying rural backdrop. "I wondered if you'd come alone," Keller said, a thin smile playing on his lips. "Smarter than I gave you credit for." Frank's hands clenched into fists. "Where is my daughter?" Keller maintained his distance, casually brushing dust from his sleeve. "Mackenzie took your girl to hurt me, not you. He knew you'd come after me first," a clever diversion from his own operation. Without warning, Frank lunged forward, grabbing Keller by his silk tie and slamming him against a wooden beam. "Where is she?" he shouted, pressing his forearm against the older man's throat. "Tell me where she is, or I swear to God." Two men materialized from the shadows, their hands moving toward concealed weapons. Keller raised a hand, stopping them, even as Frank's grip tightened. "Let me go, Anderson," Keller said calmly, "and I'll tell you what I know." Frank released him, stepping back as Keller straightened his tie, his composure quickly returning. $50,000, he stated flatly. "That's my price for information on Mackenzie's whereabouts. Consider it an investment in your daughter's life." The drive home was torture. Frank pounded the steering wheel repeatedly, tears streaming down his weathered face. $50,000 might as well be $50 million, an impossible sum for a struggling farmer, already drowning in debt. Martha was waiting in the kitchen when he returned, her face a mask of fury and fear. "You went alone? To meet Keller?" Her voice rose with each word. "How could you do something so reckless? What if it was a trap? Haven't we lost enough already?" Frank collapsed into a kitchen chair, the weight of his decision crushing him. "He says Mackenzie has her, says he knows where they might be, but wants $50,000 for the information." Within the hour, Agent Thompson had assembled a tactical team in an unmarked van parked 2 miles from the Anderson farm. "Keller's arrogant enough to still be there," he explained, distributing photographs and diagrams of the mill. "We move quietly. If he's still on site, we take him." The raid yielded nothing but fresh tire tracks and cigarette butts still smoldering in the dirt. Keller had anticipated Frank's betrayal and vanished. Later that afternoon, a multi-agency task force convened in Helena. Investigators from the FBI, Montana State Police, and 2 neighboring states gathered in a conference room, walls covered with photographs of missing children connected to Mackenzie and Keller's operation. "We believe Joel Mackenzie is connected to a human trafficking network operating between Montana and British Columbia," explained Agent Thompson, pointing to a map with red lines indicating possible routes. "Children are being taken across the border, possibly for illegal adoption schemes targeting wealthy foreign clients." Back in Oak Ridge, Martha and Frank sat across from a financial consultant in a sterile Bozeman office. The woman slid documents across the desk, her expression sympathetic but professional. "If you sell the north section and the western pasture," she explained, "you can maintain the house and essential structures for approximately 12 more months without regular income. It's not ideal, but it would give you some financial breathing room while you," she hesitated, "while you continue searching." In the hallway outside the consultant's office, Samantha pressed her ear against the door, listening to her parents discuss selling off pieces of her legacy. Her heart sank as she realized the true cost of Lily's disappearance, not just emotional, but the literal dismantling of their family heritage. That evening, Frank walked the perimeter of his property as the sun set behind the mountains. The land had been in the Anderson family for 3 generations, passed down from his grandfather, who had homesteaded in Montana after the Great War. Each acre held memories: the north field where he'd taught Samantha to ride a bicycle, the western pasture where Lily had learned to identify wildflowers. Agent Thompson arrived the next morning with a map marked with 3 possible locations where informants had placed Mackenzie in recent months: one in northern Idaho, another in eastern Oregon, and a third near the Canadian border. "We're pursuing all 3 leads simultaneously," Thompson explained. "If he's at any of these locations, we'll find him." 2 days later, Martha and Frank sat at their kitchen table, signing papers, authorizing the sale of nearly half their land. The weight of the pen felt immense in Martha's hand as she signed away her children's birthright to fund the search for one of them. The phone rang just as the realtor collected the signed documents. Martha answered, immediately recognizing Mrs. Coleman's voice, Lily's teacher. "Martha," the woman said urgently, "a man came to the school today asking questions about Lily. He claimed to be a distant relative interested in helping with the search. When I expressed skepticism, he left in a hurry. The most disturbing thing is, he was driving a blue truck, and I'm almost certain it was Joel Mackenzie with altered appearance." Martha's hand shook as she hung up the phone, her face drained of color. "It was Mrs. Coleman," she whispered to Frank. "She thinks she saw Joel Mackenzie at the school, asking about Lily. He was driving a blue truck." The news electrified the investigation. By nightfall, FBI agents in unmarked vehicles were stationed around Oak Ridge Elementary School, monitoring every approaching vehicle. An agent posed as a maintenance worker, methodically raking leaves while surveilling the playground. Another sat in a nondescript sedan in the parking lot, camera with telephoto lens at the ready. Inside the sheriff's office, Mrs. Coleman sat across from a forensic artist, describing the man who had claimed to be Lily's relative. "His hair was darker, and he had a beard now," she explained, watching as the artist's pencil moved across the paper. "But those eyes, I'd recognize those cold eyes anywhere. It was Mackenzie, I'm certain of it." The following morning, Frank signed the final documents transferring ownership of the northern section of the Anderson farm. Each signature felt like a betrayal of his ancestors, but the alternative, giving up the search for Lily, was unthinkable. The $30,000 from the sale would buy them time and resources to continue looking for their daughter. "I'll have the funds transferred to your account by tomorrow afternoon," the buyer's representative assured him, seemingly oblivious to the emotional weight of the transaction. Later that day, American and Canadian investigators gathered around a large map spread across a conference table, tracing potential routes Mackenzie might have taken. A red line marked the path from Montana to British Columbia, with a small X indicating where border surveillance had captured an image of a vehicle matching Mackenzie's 3 days after Lily's disappearance. "He crossed at a remote checkpoint near midnight," explained the RCMP officer, pointing to the location. "Used identification that we now know was falsified. We're coordinating with local authorities in British Columbia to locate any properties associated with him." Martha stood at the kitchen window, watching as the new owner of their northern fields walked the perimeter, taking measurements and making notes. His practical assessment of the land, evaluating soil quality and irrigation access, felt like a desecration of ground that had once been the site of family picnics and Lily's first attempts at horseback riding. That Sunday, the weekly vigil for Lily at Sacred Heart Church drew noticeably fewer participants. Pews that had been filled to capacity in the first weeks after her disappearance now contained scattered attendees, most avoiding Martha's gaze as she entered. Pastor Williams tried to maintain an atmosphere of hope despite the dwindling numbers. "We must not lose faith," he urged the congregation. "The Lord hears our continued prayers for little Lily's safe return." After the service, Eleanor Whitfield approached Martha with a casserole dish covered in foil. "I made your family dinner," she said, her expression a mixture of sympathy and discomfort. "I also wanted to suggest that perhaps a memorial service might help bring some closure. It's been almost 3 months now, and—" The look Martha gave her froze the words in Eleanor's throat. "My daughter is not dead," Martha stated, each word precise and sharp as glass. "Thank you for the food." The next morning, Samantha stood at the entrance to Oak Ridge Middle School, taking deep breaths to steel herself for her return after weeks of absence. As she walked through the halls, conversations halted abruptly, followed by whispers once she passed. Her former best friend Jessica offered a weak smile but didn't approach. In the main investigation room, Agent Thompson, now sporting several days of stubble and dark circles under his eyes, delivered difficult news to the Andersons. "We need to reallocate some resources," he explained apologetically. "The case remains active, but we're reducing the number of agents assigned exclusively to Lily's disappearance." That evening, Frank sat alone in the barn, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle. He stared at the empty space where the FBI command center had been, now just bare walls with a few forgotten maps and photographs still pinned up. The weight of failure pressed down on him like a physical force. Martha's response to the scaling back of the investigation was to throw herself into maintaining Lily's presence in their home. She washed her daughter's clothes weekly, carefully folding them and returning them to drawers. She changed the sheets on Lily's bed every Friday, as if preparing for her imminent return. At the school library, Samantha hunched over a computer, researching cases of children found after extended disappearances. She meticulously recorded details in a notebook: how they were located, how long they had been missing, what circumstances led to their discovery. Her hand cramped from writing, but she continued, page after page filled with possible scenarios that might bring Lily home. The new age-progressed image of Lily, showing how she might look after 3 months of growth, was distributed to police stations, bus terminals, and stores throughout the Northwest United States and Southwest Canada. The slight changes, slightly longer face, hair perhaps different, were subtle but important for recognition purposes. When a potential sighting was reported in Bozeman, Frank drove there immediately, heart pounding with hope. The crushing disappointment when he realized the child in question was not Lily manifested physically. His shoulders slumped, his face aged years in minutes as he trudged back to his truck. By mid-January, Lily's case had been reduced to a small paragraph on page 7 of the local newspaper, marking 3 months since her disappearance. The article contained no new information, merely a reminder that the investigation continued and tips were still welcome. On Christmas Eve, snow fell gently on the Anderson farm, covering the property in pristine white. Unlike previous years, no colorful lights adorned the house, no tree stood in the living room window. The only acknowledgement of the holiday was a small wreath Martha had placed on Lily's bedroom door. As twilight deepened into night, Martha checked the mailbox one final time before the holiday. Among the bills and Christmas cards sat a small, unmarked package. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, she found a handmade bracelet of colored beads, identical to the one Lily had been crafting in art class before she disappeared. Beneath it lay a postcard of Cranbrook, British Columbia, bearing no written message, only a small blue fingerprint in the corner. Martha stared at the blue fingerprint on the postcard, her hands trembling so violently that Frank had to take the bracelet from her before she dropped it. "It's her," Martha whispered, touching the small, incomplete bracelet of colored beads. "This is exactly like the one she was making in Mrs. Coleman's art class. Lily was stringing the yellow beads when I picked her up that Tuesday before she—" Her voice broke, unable to finish. Within hours, the bracelet and postcard were sealed in evidence bags and rushed to the Montana State Crime Lab in Helena. Technicians worked through the night, analyzing the fingerprint and fiber evidence with meticulous care. By morning, Agent Thompson called with news that sent electricity through the Anderson household. "The fingerprint is a match to Lily's school records," he confirmed, his professional tone barely concealing his excitement. "And the fibers embedded in the bracelet match carpet samples commonly used in certain Ford truck models manufactured between 1995 and 2000. The evidence triggered an international response. Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers in their distinctive red uniforms descended on Cranbrook and surrounding areas, focusing their investigation on a remote property that property records revealed had been purchased 3 years earlier by a Michael Jensen, an alias Joel Mackenzie had used previously. "The cabin is situated on 15 acres of woodland," explained Sergeant Williams of the RCMP during a video conference with FBI agents and the Andersons. "Satellite imagery shows minimal improvements to the property, just the main structure and what appears to be a small outbuilding. It's isolated, accessible only by a single dirt road, making surveillance challenging." As investigators examined the property, they uncovered disturbing evidence. Hidden beneath floorboards in the cabin's main room, officers discovered a cache of falsified documents, blank birth certificates, passport templates, and official-looking stamps for various government agencies. Martha's mental health deteriorated as the anniversary of Lily's disappearance approached. After collapsing during a grocery shopping trip, she reluctantly visited a psychiatrist in Bozeman who prescribed medication for panic attacks and insomnia. "These aren't just sedatives," Dr. Morgan explained gently. "They'll help stabilize your mood so you can function day to day. It doesn't mean you're giving up on Lily." Meanwhile, Frank took a night security position at a distribution warehouse in Bozeman, working 12-hour shifts to supplement their dwindling funds. The circles under his eyes darkened as he struggled to balance work, sleep, and the ongoing search for his daughter. "Mr. Anderson, I need you to stay alert during your shift," his supervisor warned, after finding Frank nodding off during rounds. "I understand your situation, but safety has to come first." At home, 13-year-old Samantha shouldered responsibilities far beyond her years. She managed the household schedule, prepared simple meals, and carefully monitored her mother's medication dosage, setting out pills each morning and evening in a plastic organizer. The investigation gained new momentum when Canadian and American authorities met at a border checkpoint, sharing intelligence on what they now believed was an organized trafficking operation. Maps spread across tables showed suspected routes, while photographs of known associates of Mackenzie and Keller were arranged on bulletin boards. "Our working theory is that they're operating an illegal adoption scheme," explained a Canadian investigator, pointing to a chart of financial transactions. "These children are being sold as private adoptions to desperate couples, primarily from Europe and Asia, for amounts ranging from $100,000 to $200,000 per child." Each night, Martha sat in Lily's perfectly preserved bedroom, talking to her daughter's photograph as if she could somehow hear. "We're getting closer, baby," she would say, straightening an already immaculate bedspread. "Daddy and Samantha and I are never going to stop looking for you." On the one-year anniversary of Lily's disappearance, Oak Ridge held a solemn ceremony in the town square. White balloons bearing messages of hope were released into the clear October sky, each carrying prayers and wishes for Lily's safe return. Martha watched them float away, wondering if her daughter could see them wherever she was. That evening, Frank received a call from Agent Thompson while on his security rounds. "We've uncovered records indicating at least 7 children passed through the Cranbrook property in the past 2 years, Thompson explained. Each disappearance followed a similar pattern: rural families, financial difficulties, children between 6 and 12 years old. Samantha, determined to expand the search beyond official channels, secretly created a website dedicated to finding Lily. Late at night, she scanned family photos, wrote detailed descriptions of her sister, and created an anonymous tip submission form. The site quickly gained traction in online communities dedicated to missing persons cases. Martha spent hours each day examining the Cranbrook postcard under different lighting, using a magnifying glass to search for hidden messages or clues. "There must be something more here," she insisted to Frank. "Why send this particular image? What is she trying to tell us?" Desperate for more resources, Frank sold his prized hunting rifle and his father's coin collection to hire a private investigator named James Weldon, who promised to pursue leads in Canada that bureaucratic authorities might overlook. The $5,000 bought them little more than weekly reports of dead ends and speculative theories. At a small private airfield outside Cranbrook, RCMP Constable Davis interviewed employees, showing photographs of Mackenzie and Lily. "Have you seen this man with this child, approximately in October of last year?" he asked a fuel attendant who had worked there for decades. The man studied the photos, recognition slowly dawning in his eyes. "Yeah, I remember them. Man was in a hurry, paid cash for fuel, said they were heading to Vancouver. The little girl seemed scared, wouldn't look at anyone." Late that night, the Andersons' phone rang, jolting them from uneasy sleep. On the line was RCMP Sergeant Williams, his voice tense with urgency. "We've located a couple in Vancouver who possibly adopted a girl matching Lily's description through the suspected agency. When police arrived to investigate, they found the house empty with signs of hasty departure, and a child's drawing taped to the refrigerator showing what appears to be a farm with chickens, signed simply with the letter L. The drawing of the farm with chickens, signed with the letter L, hung on the wall of the Anderson kitchen, a photocopy provided by the RCMP. 5 years had passed since that tantalizing clue. 5 years of hope rising and falling like the wheat in their diminished fields. The Anderson farm of 2023 bore little resemblance to the thriving property it had been in 1998. The once expansive land had been reduced to a third of its original size, just enough to maintain the main house and essential structures. The white paint on the farmhouse had yellowed and peeled in patches, the roof missing shingles that Frank never found time to replace. From his security guard's uniform pocket, Frank pulled the latest photograph of the property they believed had housed Lily temporarily in British Columbia. The investigation into the German couple who had allegedly adopted her had stalled in international red tape and jurisdictional disputes. Interpol's involvement had yielded little beyond confirmation that the couple had indeed returned to Germany with a child, but without concrete evidence of kidnapping, German authorities were reluctant to traumatize what appeared to be a normal family based on suspicion alone. "We need more than circumstantial connections," the latest letter from the FBI had explained diplomatically, the agency's involvement now reduced to occasional updates and follow-ups on diminishing leads. In the kitchen, Martha prepared lesson plans for her 4th grade class, her hair now streaked with premature gray. The medication bottles lined up beside her planner had become a permanent fixture, managing her anxiety and allowing her to function day to day. Her smile, once quick and easy, now required conscious effort, appearing primarily for her students' benefit. "I'm heading out," Frank called, adjusting his secure Montana uniform before beginning his 12-hour night shift. Thompson said he might call with an update on that Vancouver lead. Martha nodded absently, her eyes drifting to the calendar on the wall where October 17th was circled in red. 5 years tomorrow. 5 years of Lily's empty chair at the dinner table. 5 years of holidays marked by her absence. 5 years of wondering if she was safe, if she was loved, if she remembered them at all. In her bedroom, Samantha, now 17, sat surrounded by college brochures, the University of Montana's Criminology Department viewbook open on her lap. Her walls, once covered with posters of bands and movies, now displayed maps, timelines, and photographs connected to Lily's case. Her laptop displayed the website she had created, FindLilyAnderson.org, which now received over 5,000 visitors monthly and had become a hub for information about missing children throughout the Northwest. "I got in," she told her father as he paused at her doorway. "Full scholarship to the criminology program." Frank's tired face brightened momentarily. "That's my girl. Your mom will be so proud." The unspoken question hung between them. Would Samantha leave home to attend college while Lily remained missing? The acceptance letter had sat on her desk for 3 days, unmarked by the celebration such an achievement deserved. Later that week, the Anderson family received an unexpected visitor. Ed Tanner, a retired detective from Seattle who had specialized in missing persons cases, stood on their porch with a worn leather briefcase and weary eyes that had seen too many tragedies. "I read about Lily's case on an online forum," he explained, as Martha ushered him into the living room. "I've been reviewing cold cases since retirement. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps see what others might have missed." Tanner's methodical approach brought new energy to the investigation. The kitchen table soon became covered with chronologically organized files as he explained his process to the family. "We need to go back to day 1, he insisted, opening his laptop to display a detailed timeline he had constructed. "Review every statement, every piece of evidence without preconceptions. Sometimes the smallest inconsistency can break a case wide open." Over the following weeks, Tanner interviewed former neighbors, retraced search patterns, and scrutinized reports with a thoroughness that had made him legendary in Washington state law enforcement. His calm, grandfatherly demeanor extracted details from witnesses that previous investigators had missed. One evening, Tanner laid a document before Frank, pointing to a highlighted section. Phone records show a call made from a payphone near your property at 7:38, the morning Lily disappeared. Mackenzie claimed he was in Whitehall visiting his sister, but this directly contradicts his alibi. Frank and Tanner visited the site where the payphone had once stood, now replaced by an electric vehicle charging station. Standing there, Frank could see his property in the distance, the chicken coop visible from this vantage point. He could have watched the farm from here, Frank realized, cold dread settling in his stomach, waited for Lily to come out alone. In her weekly therapy session, Martha finally verbalized the fear she had carried silently for years. "What if we find her, and she doesn't remember us?" she asked Dr. Watson, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if she's happy in her new life, and we only bring her pain by reappearing?" When Samantha's acceptance packet arrived from the University of Montana, she brought it to her parents with mixed emotions. Pride in her achievement warred with guilt about moving forward with her life, while Lily's fate remained unresolved. "She would want you to go," Martha said softly, touching the embossed university seal on the letter. "Lily always said you were the smartest person she knew." One evening, Tanner presented his most disturbing theory to the family. "Based on communications between Mackenzie and Landry, I believe Samantha was the original target," he explained carefully, showing them coded messages he had deciphered. Something changed their plans at the last minute. Frank stormed out of the room, unable to process this new information, the guilt overwhelming him as he realized both his daughters had been in danger because of his past mistakes. As part of the renewed investigation, an age-progressed image showing how Lily might look at 13 was distributed online through Samantha's website. The sophisticated computer generation maintained Lily's distinctive features while accounting for natural aging, generating dozens of tips within days. While Tanner investigated old property records associated with Mackenzie, he made a startling discovery that prompted a midnight call to the Andersons. "We need to check your barn immediately," he said urgently. "I've found original blueprints showing a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards that wasn't in any FBI search report, and there's evidence Mackenzie made modifications to the barn weeks before Lily disappeared." Tanner's words electrified the night air. Frank was already reaching for his boots before the retired detective had finished speaking. "What kind of compartment?" he demanded, grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. "According to these original blueprints from 1942, there's a small storage space beneath the main floor, something like a root cellar, but only accessible through a concealed trapdoor," Tanner explained, spreading the yellowed documents on the table. "And I found records showing Mackenzie purchased materials for barn repairs 3 weeks before Lily disappeared." Within minutes, Frank, Samantha, and Tanner were crossing the moonlit yard toward the weathered barn. Their flashlight beams cut through the darkness as they entered, dust motes dancing in the light. The musty scent of hay and old wood enveloped them. "The blueprints indicate it should be here," Tanner directed, pointing to an area near the back wall. "Under these floorboards." They worked methodically, Frank using a crowbar to pry up the aged planks, while Samantha held a powerful flashlight steady. Their hands quickly became dirty and splintered as they tore at the weathered wood. "There's something solid here," Frank grunted after nearly an hour of work, his fingers brushing against metal beneath the dirt and rotted wood. Tanner joined him, carefully brushing away decades of accumulated soil to reveal what appeared to be a metal box, roughly the size of a small suitcase. Wearing gloves to preserve any evidence, Tanner gently lifted the container from its hiding place. It was surprisingly well preserved, sealed against moisture with what looked like industrial-grade plastic wrapping. "He wanted whatever's inside to last," Tanner observed grimly as they carried the box to the house. On the kitchen table, they carefully unwrapped the protective layers to reveal a metal lockbox. Inside, protected in sealed plastic bags, they found two items: a small purple diary decorated with silver unicorns and a stack of handwritten letters on yellowed paper. Frank picked up the diary with trembling hands. "This is Lily's," he whispered, recognizing the childish handwriting. "She got it for her 8th birthday. We thought it was lost." Samantha began reading one of the letters, her face growing pale. "It's signed V.L. Victor Landry," she said, her voice quavering. "Listen to this. The younger one serves our purposes better, more adaptable. Prepare everything for mid-October." By dawn, they had contacted Agent Lisa Cortez of the Montana Department of Criminal Investigation, a specialist in crimes against children who had taken personal interest in cold cases involving minors. She arrived at the Anderson farm by 7:30, bringing a forensic team to properly document and collect the evidence. "We'll need to process everything carefully," Cortez explained, her dark eyes intense as she supervised the collection. "Fingerprints, DNA, handwriting analysis, everything by the book so it holds up in court." At the State Crime Lab, technicians meticulously examined each letter, using specialized equipment to extract fingerprints and analyze the paper composition. One technician confirmed what they already suspected. "The handwriting on these letters matches samples we have from Victor Landry, and we've identified partial prints from Joel Mackenzie on the envelope." That evening, Martha sat on Lily's bed, the photocopied pages of her daughter's diary open in her lap. Tears streamed down her face as she read entries from the weeks before the disappearance. "Mr. Mack showed me the kittens in the barn today. He said it's our secret. I can't tell anyone, not even Sam." Another entry, dated just 3 days before Lily vanished, made Martha's blood run cold. "Mr. Mack said he's going to take me to see the white horses near the mountain. I have to wake up really early. It's a surprise." In Portland, FBI agents finalized plans to apprehend Joel Mackenzie, now living under the name Michael Jensen, in Eugene, Oregon. Surveillance photos showed a middle-aged man with darkened hair and a beard, working as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex. "We'll move at dawn," the tactical leader explained to his team. "Subject may be armed and has extensive criminal connections. Approach with extreme caution." Samantha called the University of Montana admissions office, her voice steady as she explained her situation. "I need to defer my enrollment. My family is dealing with an emergency. My sister's case has been reopened." Agent Cortez met with the Andersons to explain how Lily's diary revealed classic predatory behavior. "This is textbook grooming," she explained, pointing to specific entries. "He established trust, created secrets, normalized inappropriate behavior, and planned isolated contact, all methodically executed." On the wall of the investigation room, a map now displayed connections between Mackenzie, Jensen, and other suspected child disappearances across 4 states. Red pins marked last known locations of missing children, creating a disturbing pattern along highways leading north toward Canada. Frank and Tanner spent hours researching international travel records, eventually discovering that Michael Jensen had traveled to Germany twice in the past 5 years. The timing matches periods when the German couple who may have Lily returned to their home country, Tanner noted, adding this information to their growing evidence board. In her therapy session, Martha struggled with overwhelming guilt. "I should have noticed the signs," she sobbed. She was different in those weeks before, more secretive. How did I miss it? What kind of mother doesn't see when her child is being manipulated? In Eugene, Oregon, FBI agents silently surrounded the apartment complex where Mackenzie Jensen lived. Agents in tactical gear took position at all exits while the arrest team prepared to move in. The news arrived in rapid succession, leaving the Andersons stunned. Joel Mackenzie had been captured in his Oregon apartment and during initial questioning, broke under pressure and revealed the information they had waited 10 years to hear. Lily was alive, had been sold for illegal adoption to a German couple, and now lived under the name Emily Carson, having returned to the United States after her adoptive parents died, and currently worked as a nurse in a small rural community in northern Idaho, less than 300 miles from the farm where she was born. Lily is alive. The words hung in the air of the Anderson kitchen, impossible and miraculous. Samantha gripped the edge of the table to steady herself, while Martha collapsed into a chair, her medication-regulated composure shattering completely. Agent Cortez approached the situation with measured caution, despite the family's desperate urge to immediately drive to Idaho. "We need to proceed carefully," she explained during an emergency meeting at the FBI field office. "Emily Carson has built an entire life without knowing her true origins. A sudden confrontation could cause psychological trauma." Over the next 72 hours, investigators discreetly confirmed Emily's identity through hospital employment records. A field agent, posing as a patient with a minor injury, took photographs of the 33-year-old nurse working at North Idaho Community Hospital. The images showed a woman with chestnut hair cut in a practical bob, but with unmistakable blue eyes. Martha's eyes. When presented with the photographs, Martha reached out with trembling fingers, touching the image of the grown woman who had once been her little girl. "It's her," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I would know my daughter anywhere." That night, Frank and Martha engaged in an intense debate about how to approach Emily. "She deserves to know the truth about who she is," Frank insisted, pacing their bedroom. "Her entire life has been built on a lie," Martha countered, her voice breaking. "But what if we destroy everything she's built? What if knowing the truth hurts her more than the lie?" After consulting with psychologists specializing in trauma and identity, the family decided that Samantha, as Lily's sister, might represent the gentlest introduction. "Siblings often maintain the strongest unconscious connections," Dr. Levine explained. "And the age difference might make the revelation less threatening than coming from parents who would have expectations." 5 days later, Samantha stood nervously on the porch of a small blue house in rural Idaho, clutching a box containing Lily's unicorn plush, her music box that played "Part of Your World," and family photographs. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she knocked on the door. Emily Carson answered cautiously, opening the door just enough to see her visitor. "Can I help you?" she asked, her expression guarded and unfamiliar. "My name is Samantha Anderson," she began, struggling to keep her voice steady. "I believe you might be my sister." Emily's reaction was immediate and defensive. "I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not this person," she said, beginning to close the door. "I don't have a sister." As the door narrowed, Samantha began to sing softly, a personalized version of "You Are My Sunshine," with altered lyrics that the Anderson sisters had sung together every night before bed. The effect was electric. Emily froze, her hand still on the door, eyes widening in confusion. "How do you know that song?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The DNA results arrived 3 days later, confirming what the Anderson family already knew in their hearts. Emily Carson was, without question, Lily Anderson. 99.9% match, Agent Cortez informed them. "There's no doubt." A specialized team of psychologists prepared Martha for her first meeting with her long-lost daughter. "She may not respond the way you hope," they cautioned. "She might be angry, confused, or completely emotionally shut down. You need to respect whatever boundaries she establishes." The reunion took place in a neutral setting, a peaceful garden in Coeur d'Alene chosen by the therapists. Martha arrived early, trembling with anticipation and fear. When Emily appeared on the garden path, Martha had to physically restrain herself from running to embrace her daughter, instead waiting patiently as the young woman approached cautiously. "I don't remember you," Emily stated plainly, maintaining her distance. "I don't remember anything before I was 10. Martha nodded, swallowing her disappointment. "I don't expect you to remember. I just want you to know that we never stopped looking for you, not for a single day." 2 weeks later, Emily visited Frank's grave in the Oak Ridge Cemetery, placing a wildflower on the headstone as Samantha stood beside her. "He never gave up," Samantha explained softly. "Even at the end, he was following a new lead in Canada. He died still believing he would bring you home." As summer turned to fall, Emily, still struggling with her dual identity, accepted Samantha's invitation to visit the restored Anderson farm. She stood hesitantly before the white farmhouse, absorbing every detail with a mixture of clinical detachment and inexplicable familiarity. "Would you like to see something?" Samantha asked gently, leading her to the old oak tree that shaded the western side of the property. She pointed to marks carved into the trunk, height measurements with dates, the last showing Lily, 4'2", September 1998. "Dad measured our height every 3 months," Samantha explained. "After you disappeared, he kept measuring the tree. Said when you came back, we'd want to know how much you'd grown." Emily traced the notches with her fingertips, her expression distant. Something flickered in her memory, not a complete recollection, but a sensory impression, like an echo from another life. "He sang while he measured," she murmured, surprising herself with the words. "Something about building a stairway to the stars?" "Catch a falling star," Samantha confirmed, eyes brimming with tears. It was his favorite song. On a crisp October morning, exactly 26 years after the disappearance, Emily, who had begun occasionally responding to Lily in private moments with her newfound family, woke before dawn. She walked to the reconstructed chicken coop, now empty but maintained by Samantha as part of the farm's restoration. As the first ray of sunlight touched the Montana fields, she completed a private ritual, scattering a handful of corn on the ground, finishing the task interrupted so many years before. Watching from the kitchen window, Samantha understood that some wounds never fully heal, but become integrated into a life that continues, transformed from insurmountable chasms into parts of a broader landscape that includes both pain and redemption. While returning to Idaho the following week, Emily made a decision. She would take fertilized eggs with her, starting her own small chicken coop, thus uniting the fragments of her divided identity into a single continuous narrative, where her lost past and hard-won present could finally coexist in peace.